Welcome back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are merging the streams of sports and all sorts of social issues at Baltimore Positive this week. Don Moeller and I coming together, and no better time to do it than coming off a win, going down to the capital of the free world, down in Araljon, Landover, Largo, taking on a team that doesn't even have a last name, and a familiar foe this week as the Cincinnati Bengals come to Baltimore. And, are you traveling with the team, Dan? I don't know, broadcaster to broadcaster, city to city. I'm doing the road games. Luke is doing the home games. You will not see me this week, despite living 6 blocks away. But are you getting on the team plane? Are you Tier 1 Dan Hoard?
I am not. No, most NFL radio crews are doing their games from their home stadium, and that's the case with the Bengals. So the NFL has done what it can to make this doable for radio crews. They provide us with a direct fiber feed from the road stadium. We get the sound effects, so it sounds good on the radio. We get an all 22 camera, so not only do we get the normal TV feed, but we can see all 22 players on the field, which really helps my analyst Dave Lapham. But it's obviously not quite as good as being there, and I'm really going to miss being in Baltimore because that's my favorite broadcast booth in the NFL.
It's a pretty good seat, isn't it? Yeah, they stuck me down in the corner in Washington last week, and I couldn't see the down and distance at all. I could never see whether it was a first down, so I'm watching the game on TV. And yet in Houston, they put me at the crest of the moon, and I had the greatest seat, and I thought, there's nowhere else I would rather be, even in the empty dome of Houston, than watching football. Give me your heart on this. I mean, you've been doing this 10 years, long time, and I'll ask Lapham. I'll get together with him at some point. But where your heart is on all this, where you're not at the game anymore. And I've told people, I had Dick Cass on last week, I said, these games that I watch on TV, I'm not watching the game, I'm watching the ball. And if you can't see the secondary, you're not really watching the game.
Well, as a play-by-play announcer, really, I am watching the ball. That's the number one thing I have to do. Who has it? Where does he have it? What is he doing with it? And it's really up to my analyst, Dave Lapham, to watch everything else. And that's exactly what Lap does, which is why I think he's one of the best analysts in the NFL. He literally does not watch the ball. He watches everything but the ball and then says eventually the ball will come to him. Whereas I really have to pay attention to the ball. So that's how our give and take works as play-by-play man and analyst. But having said all that, what I really miss is the stuff that you can't see on the TV screen between the plays. You can't always see who's coming in and out of the game. You can't see a guy that's being looked at by the medical staff on the sideline. You can't see a guy that's being walked to the locker room because he has an injury. So there's so much stuff that happens away from that narrow focus TV lens that I do really miss when I'm not at the game.
Dan's calling the game from Cincinnati. That means he'll have chili, but he will not have a Faithley's crab cake on the way in this week. So give me the vibe on what we're going to see from the football team. I had dinner with an old friend of ours a few weeks ago, and, watching the coaching and watching the transition from afar and seeing that y'all were bad enough to get the best quarterback. Now you got the best quarterback. I'm a little bit more worried about your quarterback long-term than I am the other guy at the north side of your state, where I hope everyone votes, by the way. If you're in Ohio, vote. Please vote. But back to the programming. I think your kid can play. I mean, and we're only a couple of weeks into this, but I'm sold on him as a concern in our division.
Joe Burrow's been great. I have no complaints about Joe Burrow whatsoever. And what he's done through 4 games, considering how bad the protection has been, is phenomenal. Now, this past week, technically he got sacked once, which was really kind of a kneel down at the end of the game when they had the game in the bag. So he really didn't get sacked at all. He only got hit 5 times, which is fairly normal for an NFL quarterback. But the week before that, 8 sacks, 17 quarterback hits. And I had the chance to talk to former Bengals quarterback J.T. O'Sullivan in the days after that game. J.T. does a lot of analysis of the quarterback play on YouTube and elsewhere. And his words really hit home for me. He said, that is unsustainable. A quarterback cannot get hit 17 times on a regular basis in the NFL and survive. So it was great to see the offensive line play much, much better last week. That was against Jacksonville. We'll see if they can protect Joe this Sunday against Baltimore.
I see familiar names here, and then I see new names, which, I guess in Cincinnati for a long time was all the same names, right? Starting with Marvin and just going right down the list, right? And after Carson Palmer, it just became Dalton and the whole list. This new mix of players, give me the heart transplant that's happened for a franchise that had the same heart for about a decade and a half.
Well, they went to the playoffs 5 straight years, beginning in 2011. And at the end of that run in 2015, that was really their best team. They won 12 games. That was the year they were 10-2 and the number one seed at the time in the AFC when Andy Dalton broke his thumb. So naturally, after that run in 2016, they didn't want to blow it up. They had a great team, but they started to decline in 2016. Then they took another step back in 2017. And at that point, it was probably time to rebuild, and they didn't right away. Well, now they have. Not only did they have the number one pick in the draft in Joe Burrow, but really for the first time in recent Bengals history, they splurged in free agency. The Bengals are one of the biggest spenders in the NFL this past offseason, and they weren't just going out and getting kind of that bargain basement tier of free agent, which they've often done in the past, trying to plug a hole here and plug a hole there. They spent big. DJ Reader was the highest paid nose tackle in the NFL when they signed him. They signed Trey Waynes to a very generous contract. Unfortunately, he's hurt right now. They spent a lot of money on Von Bell. And then after that, they did kind of in a free agent as well. So it's a serious rebuild, trying to get this thing back to the playoff level as soon as they possibly can.
Burrow and bringing him in and, where the draft – I mean, every part of this was sort of weird, right? For him finding a new city where he can't go meet a fan, they're trying to sell tickets there, but they don't have tickets to sell. Although you let people in there, we don't let people in here. I was down in Texas last week. You couldn't get in. This week you could have gotten in, right? So I think all of that's part of this, but the Bengals sort of turning the page for the era and for what it represents. This is sort of the dawning of the next thing. I mean, it really did give me some thoughts back to Carson Palmer and everything that sort of blossomed out of that.
Yeah, the big difference between now and back when they drafted Carson Palmer, number one overall, back in 2003, is that they sat him for the entire season. He did not take a single snap his rookie year.
John Kitna, right? Was that right?
John Kitna was the quarterback. That was Marvin's first year as head coach, and he felt it was important at the time to try to get some credibility in his own locker room and win as many games as he possibly could. And he felt then that John Kitna gave them a better chance right off the bat than a rookie Carson Palmer would have. And to Marvin's credit, they went 8-8 that first year, which was a big step up from where they had been before. And then
I saw the Bruce Coslett era. I saw some of that. Yes.
Yeah, Dick LeBeau, Dave Shula, Bruce Coslett. There were some rough eras in general. But that first year, they went 8-8. Carson came in the next year. They went 8-8 again. The year after that, they won the North, and they were on their way. So it made sense at the time. But now you don't do that. Nobody, well, I don't know, maybe Miami will do it this year, but nobody that takes a quarterback that high has him sit the bench for an entire year. You've only got a guaranteed 5 years of that guy under contract if you draft him in the first round. So you want to get the clock going and get him up to speed as quickly as you possibly can. And from the night that Joe Burrow was drafted, there was never any question that he would be the starting quarterback on day one, even though Andy Dalton was still technically in the picture back then. They hadn't let him go yet. But everybody knew they were moving on from Andy. They were committing to Joe Burrow. And so far, so good.
Dan Hoard is the voice of the Cincinnati Bengals. He's also the voice of the Cincinnati Bearcats. And, you're like the busiest guy in the world this time of year. I mean, you and all my broadcasting buddies. I had Ian Eagle on, running around with the Nets and inside of bubbles. And Kenny Albert's been in and out of Canada 5 times. But give me the life as the dual broadcaster here. This has had to have been the strangest 6 months of your life, like all the rest of us, right?
It has been strange, but I'm telling you, it's good right now because the University of Cincinnati Bearcats are 11th in the country. This is the highest they've been ranked since they went to the Sugar Bowl back in 2009. Now, the status of the Big Ten and the Pac-12 obviously has something.
How do they rank teams when nobody's playing, Dan? I looked at my phone a couple weeks ago. I'm like, come on, really? Are we going to rank teams this year? Yeah, really?
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, Cincinnati was ranked 14th in the country at the time. They beat a top 25 opponent, and they went down a spot in the rankings because 2 Big Ten teams miraculously popped into the top 25 when they announced that they were going to play after all. So the rankings are a little bit funky. But nonetheless, Cincinnati, the University of Cincinnati, has a great team this year. They've got a legitimate chance, I think, to run the table in the regular season. And then as for the Bengals, well, they're not rebuilt yet, but Joe Burrow has obviously brought a lot of excitement to this city.
All right, man, you put this stuff on the walls behind you. I mean, I brought the pride of Northern Ohio behind me with the leg lamp. But, I mean, you got the wrong Reds on the wall. You got red socks on the wall behind, not red legs. I mean, I'm looking for Ted Kluszewski back there or Frank Robinson or something. And instead, I just get, one of our former nemesis that did not have a good campaign this year.
Well, so you're referring to the jerseys behind me on my family room wall. I have a series of autographed jerseys. And the thing with me is these are not necessarily great players, although they all are. But these are guys that I have a personal connection to. So they're
Sean Casey was a great Red, so I should give you that, right?
Yeah, so Sean Casey is one of the jerseys. Obviously, most of his great Major League Baseball career was spent in Cincinnati. We've got the big O, Oscar Robertson, directly behind me. That's tough to beat.
I see the O, man. Never go wrong there with the big O.
Yeah.
Not in Kansas City, not there, anywhere.
This other Boston Red Sox jersey is actually my pal Kevin Youkilis, who is from Cincinnati.
The Greek god of walks.
Greek God of Walks, Hall of Famer from the University of Cincinnati, and the world's biggest Cincinnati Bengals fan. So I'm not kidding you. In a typical Bengals game, I can't look at my phone because I'm going to get multiple texts during the course of the game from Youkilis, either going crazy over something good or venting over something bad, and then I will go back after the game and follow his timeline for the way he was emotionally going through the game.
Tell Youkilis I want to have him on after the Bengals play the Ravens one time. We'll have some fun with it. I did not realize this. My wife's a Red Sox fan, right? So Kurt Schilling, I don't brag about this anymore because of, politics, and I had to block him and throw him off of Twitter and Facebook recently. But I DJ'd his wedding. He married one of my best friends growing up. His wife is one of my dearest friends on the whole planet. So, I married a New Hampshire girl who loved the Red Sox. I married her in 2003. We went to playoff games. We were at Game 7 with Johnny Damon at Yankees. So I even wore a Red Sox hat. My wife threw out the first pitch at Fenway Park at one point. So, I have a soft spot. Louis ended his career with the Red Sox. So I'm not totally anti-Red Sox. I thought it fascinating. And Sean Casey's one of the nicest baseball players I ever met. I'd see him at the All-Star game every year, and he was just a super guy.
Still is. Yeah, they call him the governor or the mayor, rather, for a reason because, he is the ultimate shake a hand and know everybody that he meets and remember their names kind of guy. Love Sean Casey, one of my all-time favorite Reds. And, it's nice to have him on the Wall of Fame. I'm grateful that he gave me one of his Red Sox jerseys and signed it. It's a wonderful keepsake.
I got to get a Wall of Fame. I got a picture at the radio station of Palmer eating pancakes back in 66. So, and of course, we got Wild Bill Hagee doing the other O, not the Oscar O, the Oriole O in Section 34 over at the Memorial Stadium. I went to Cincinnati in 2015 on the baseball tour. And Marvin was having some sort of surgery that he was out of commission. It was July. It was when the All-Star game was in Cincinnati. Marvin was a little under the weather, I think. And I came in alone and I went looking for Crosley Field, right? It's in a warehouse somewhere. And apparently home plate was marked, but I looked all through the internet trying to find it. I spent 2 hours in the middle of nowhere in Cincinnati looking for Crosley. I never found it. I just went and had a chili dog thing, you guys. But do you know where it is? I mean, can you take me to home plate if I needed to?
I think I could. I've actually never been to that location. I didn't grow up here, but I know roughly where it is. I know exactly where the stadium was, so we would have to search around a little bit to find the home plate, but I know it has been marked. It is kind of,
No, I mean, I went and I watched, the Ken Burns, the colorized videos and Frank Robinson and the white shirts and the Ted Kluszewski thing and the cigarette signs, all of that stuff. And I went, just looking to have a moment. And Dan, it started to rain, and you know what I mean? And I'm out there in the middle of friggin' nowhere. And you know what I mean?
Rough part of town, too.
And I'm in, I was on day maybe it was early. It was maybe day 8 or 9. It was early in the 30 days. So I still had a lot of energy to do these kind of things. And I was so disappointed. I'm I ain't coming back here again. Even if Hoard brings me Lapham, Marvin, I don't care. But I really did want to see it to like touch history because I'm weird like that, you know?
Well, we can do better than that because while the original home plate is still at its location, which is in an industrial part of town, it's close to train tracks and there's really nothing there anymore. They have taken significant portions of the stadium and rebuilt it in a different part of town. It's called Blue Ash as part of a youth field. So you can go to this youth field. My son has played games at this location, and the old manually operated scoreboard is there. They've got the raised outfield, which they've kind of copied in Houston, but that was started at Crosley Field in Cincinnati. So better than the original home plate is this youth baseball complex that features a lot of the old stadium in Blue Ash, Ohio. I will take you there when you return.
Okay, and whatever you do, man, don't give me that chili. It'll get me all messed up, man. You're an import there too. It's an acquired taste. We'll get your crab cake next year, right? I know one thing: if there is an America and there's not a plague, we will play the Bengals again. You will come in and we will have a crab cake together. I'd love to do that. And it's great seeing you. It's nice zooming with old friends around sports and around politics in the world and actually being able to look at. So I appreciate you coming on, Dan.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Don't beat us this week. Don't do it.
We'll be trying.
See you later. Dan Hoard. You can find him, Dan_Hoard. He is the radio voice of the Cincinnati Bengals as well as the Bearcats. Give me a little preview of all things Cincinnati and my trip to Crosley Field that went awry, and it's still, I don't know. I've done other crazy things like that. Look for places that I never find, So the Bono sang a song about that. Still haven't found what he's looking for. So maybe I'll go back. I'm looking for chili I like in Cincinnati. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live and converging WNST.net with Baltimore Positive.